Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be here. I'm Chris Duffey. I'm on the strategic development team at Adobe, specifically focused on Creative Cloud Enterprise across the 8,000 plus or so creative agencies out there in the world. And that definition of creativity and agencies is always expanding as this audience so well knows. I've been at Adobe for about 5 years now. It's been exciting to see Adobe's evolution, but also the creative industry's evolution over the last 5 years or so. Previously, I was about 25 years or so on the agency side. I rose up through the ranks to be a global executive creative director, focused on digital health, which I found infinitely and still find infinitely fascinating. I started out literally in the mailroom of an agency in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I had a neighbor who owned an agency, and they just looked like a cool person, so I wanted to see what that was all about, and got an internship in the mailroom. And what I found was I got to meet, I love that because I got to meet a lot of interesting people every day. So I would stop by everyone's office, drop off the mail, and have a little chat. And I always found it fascinating. That agency was organized by the creatives had their own floor, and I always found it interesting. There was so much energy and kind of excitement on that floor, so I think I gravitated towards design and advertising. And so I went to a traditional 4-year college, and I like to say during the day I kind of put a polo shirt on, and then at night I went to a art school, so I would put my black t-shirt on. So I got to see that both sides of the business in many ways, kind of a business sense, but then the art side. And so one day I was looking through, a cold winter day in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I saw this little ad in communication arts that said, study advertising on the beach for a post-grad degree, and that was Miami Ad School. So I went down to Miami Ad School, and that's really where, I think theory was taught to me in kind of the traditional 4-year liberal arts school as well as the art school. But when I saw, firsthand these practitioners, professionals that came in and taught us, that's where I think the true spark was ignited. And so went up to Fallon in Minneapolis during some of the glory days of the BMW work, then Leo Burnett, and kind of learned CPG, on Pop-Tarts and Frosted Mini Wheats, and got to, present back in the day. I think that was late 90s, my first video conference call to on Nintendo, presenting some TV spots. So it was really an exciting world. And then went to New York shortly after and kind of hit Madison Avenue with DDB, and spent the following 20 years or so on the agency side. So really, loved my time on the agency side, and now I consider it a very privileged position at Adobe where I get to speak with agencies on a daily basis, so I have a really interesting vantage point across the industry. Great question. I think, in many ways, Adobe is coming from it from a software or technology standpoint. And then the agencies or SIs, the Accentures of the world, kind of came from it from the creativity standpoint. But I think everyone ultimately is meeting in the middle where it's creativity plus technology. And it's not, it's of equal balance, of equal importance in terms of, back in the day, you would say the technology supports or amplifies the idea. And in reality, they're equal, equal partners in terms of the output. So I think Adobe is equally a creative and a technology company. If you look at Adobe.com, from just a funnel perspective, it's we like to consider ourselves customer zero, where we use our own tools to design our tools, and then we use our analytics tools to help market our tools on Adobe.com. So, we're truly walking the walk in every sense, everything from the ideation to the design to the UX to the distribution and measurement. And so, in many ways, we're just as much of a creative company as a technology company. It was a fascinating journey in many ways, one that I'm still slightly recovering from. It was being a creative. I think we've all had that moment of looking at the blank page, but nothing prepared me for that first call from the editor saying, "Where's the first draft?" And so you have these moments of terror of many ways, and I think that's something agencies might take for granted, is the power of the creative community and the partnership, not just within the creative department, but the support you get from strategists, from the account team, the technologists. I think that is quite valuable. So writing a book in many ways is you're going at it from an individual standpoint, which is somewhat tougher. So I was on the digital health side, and about 10, 12 years ago, IBM Watson started really going deep into healthcare. And, I think we got quite inspired. I'd say we, meaning the health, digital health sector, in terms of this promise of being able to help predict these large pools of data, in that case, health data. And so that was, I think, an initial kind of source of inspiration. Fast forward a few years, and we were starting to get these requests on in terms of the complexities of EHR systems, electronic health records, and was there a way for AI to play a role in predicting orphan disease states? So by nature, orphan disease states are diseases that aren't that common. And so quite often physicians have historical knowledge to make an assessment of symptoms that they've seen years and years beforehand. But when it's an orphan disease state, they don't have, in many cases, recollection or knowledge of that. So that's where an AI can come in and help make some correlations. Putting my kind of former FDA PRC hat on, the AI system would never diagnose, it would just be suggestions to the physician. So those were kind of some early sources of inspiration on the power of AI in terms of data analytics and how it can surface insights out of that. Coming from another perspective, then we started seeing, like Alibaba Luban, which was using AI to do permutations of execution. And so, it was just a confluence of many inputs that kind of, inspired me to dig a little deeper. And so in many ways, this was a research project to see, let's try to push AI to its limit in terms of its role with creativity. A fourth input was Adobe Sensei. About 4 or 5 years ago, Adobe announced their AI tapestry of technologies called Adobe Sensei, and so that was another input. So Amy is essentially a layered approach of language transformers, which is kind of a technical term for an AI system that can either take write to read inputs or voice to write inputs. And so I compiled, some out of the box technologies, compiled some APIs from GitHub, and created what I called AMY, which stands for AI plus me. And it's coincidentally, serendipitously, is a kind of a name. So Amy was my co-author, and in the beginning it was somewhat of a exploration, but to loop it back to the power of creative support, that is where I think the light bulb went off for me, where at some points where I felt I hit a dead end, I would tap into Amy. And one of my favorite things was semantic analysis, where I would put a section into that specific technology, and I would get feedback like too humorous, a little shrewd, unfounded. And so that was I think really exciting for me as a creative to see AI is not writing for me, but it is helping inform me in a near real-time basis. So I think that's ultimately my hope for the takeaway of the book is AI is not a replacement for human creativity. Automation is essentially here to take away that grunt work. In that case, it would help find resources for me and kind of rate it in many ways, and it would sometimes be a sounding board, in that case, semantics. So that's the true hope, that it's just a metaphor for what AI can do in terms of taking grunt work away and getting you to a starting point faster. Many components that are open source. Okay. And they're even within, that was written 3-4 years ago, even since then, things like GPT-3 are amazing, exponentially more powerful from OpenAI. Microsoft has their version. So there's a number of resources out there. And that's just from I tried to infuse AI into every aspect of the book. That was from the writing standpoint. The graphics in the book used AI. Even the art, the cover artwork was helped generated by AI. It was also found through AI search, so image search capabilities. The cover art is similar to what is over your right shoulder, that star. Right. On your shelf. So I found a source of inspiration, put it into Adobe stock, which has image search similarity, which is powered by AI ML, and it helps suggest that piece of artwork. And then obviously from the distribution and measurement of the marketing of the book, you used AI as well. So try to truly use it in every sense to pressure test it. There were areas where I felt, it didn't fully realize the promise. Early on, it does get better, which I think is one learning. The initial, and the book was written literally as a conversation with AI, almost like an Alexa-like figure. So it's kind of Chris and then Amy, and we just kind of transcript the back and forth. You can see, maybe the first, in full transparency, the first chapter or two, there's a little clunkiness on Amy's side. I intentionally left it a little raw so you could see how it got more polished, because the AI system actually learned over time. One of the fun parts was early on, I met a former writer from David Letterman, who was trying to codify humor. And so he built an initial API on jokes. And so early on in the book, there's a joke or two that they fall so flat that they're funny, which is kind of interesting kind of hole to go down in terms of what is humor type of thing. I believe so. I think, in many ways, I think South Korea is at the forefront of this intersection of creativity and technology. And I think, the book and maybe the thirst for the interest in the book is a reflection of just that. Obviously there's some great tech companies, a number of great tech companies in South Korea. So I think, that it being translated there, it's doing phenomenally well. So I think that's a reflection of that interest, but also knowledge base of how do those two pieces fit together. It's AI is a bit of a suitcase word, and from an advertising standpoint, I always say probably some of the worst branding out there, right? Nobody likes anything artificial, but it's become the catch-all term. Every couple of years, it kind of bounces back and forth between AI and ML, machine learning. But I think just AI is so culturally pervasive now, the term kind of gravitates towards that. So, I think from an advertising creative standpoint, obviously my world is Adobe, so my reference point goes back to Adobe. Adobe Sensei is our foundational AI framework that goes across our three clouds: Creative Cloud, Experience Cloud, and Document Cloud. Creative Cloud, everything the creative community knows and loves, tools that help you create the content. Experience Cloud is essentially our analytics cloud that allows you for distribution and measurement of that content. And then Document Cloud, the third cloud, is PDF, Acrobat, Adobe Sign, and some notary aspects of it. So Sensei goes across all those three. Some fun ones to call out is Adobe Photoshop is now the world's most AI-powered software out there. We've got something maybe about the last year and a half or so called neural filters within Photoshop. If anyone listening hasn't played with it, encourage you to. It's really quite fascinating from the output, but also technically. So there's a number of features where you can start to adapt and morph facial expressions, which I think is really interesting on a number of levels. There's also the ability to find a source of inspiration. You take a picture, for example, on your mobile phone, and you share it, reference it with your core your core artwork, and it can kind of mesh those two styles together, which I think is pretty cool stuff. So that's kind of an instance of like CANs and GANs, generative adversarial networks, which essentially takes some inputs and then it can translate that through the output. So those are some in Photoshop. We also have, I think, in video, another, just from a time efficiency standpoint, a profound thing where it can understand what is the subject in the frame and track it based off of the aspect ratio you're trying to crop to. So little things like that. I just remember back in the day, staying up all night, having to, either crop or try to get a facial expression slightly different. So again, those are examples of how AI, in this case Adobe Sensei, can get you to a starting point faster. Some newer ones, similar to what we were chatting earlier about the language transformers, we released kind of a beta about a year ago on a prototype site called the Weekend site. And so we show a demo where, let's say you land kind of an instance of dynamic creative optimization. So let's say you're landing on a travel site and it's segmented into 5 different personas. The AI can not only kind of understand which persona you probably would gravitate towards or have affinity to, but it can also understand if you have an affinity for long format, medium format, short format content. And then a level down from there is it can understand if you like humor, if you like facts, if you like storytelling. And this can all happen in near real time. Compound it from a zoom out standpoint, it also has understanding of where you are within the overall customer journey. So then it can start to populate and suggest different moments based on where you come into that experience and where your next points of on that journey should be. So really exciting things from the content creation standpoint, but also the content distribution aspect. Thank you for bringing it up. It's called decoding the metaverse, and essentially, it's based on the premise of let's look at what the on-ramps are to the metaverse and how businesses can, kind of really transport but excel their businesses through metaverse capabilities. But it always felt like there was a higher mission to achieve, and in many ways that next mission is Web3, the promise of Web3 and the metaverse. Metaverse I liken to maybe 7 years ago when AI started becoming very buzzwordy. And I think we're kind of at that inflection point with metaverse where it almost has a visceral reaction to people when they hear the word, because it's just getting thrown around so often. So, I'm quite excited as AI is now, I think, very starting to mature in terms of its use cases. But what's the broader mission for that? And in many ways, that's its application, or the evolution of its application for Web3 and metaverse environment or experiences, very immersive experiences. So I think, to unpack Web3 and the metaverse, you first have to go through a number of layers, technology layers, right? You have to first fully understand what is Web 1. Essentially, it was a read-only environment. Then you go into Web 2, which was really exciting at the time, probably 2005, 2007, where you started to not only read, but participate. So read, write in many instances. And now Web 3, we're entering the last few years where it's read, write, and be very immersive. And so that is quite exciting from a creative and a business standpoint, where we are now getting more immersive, more experiential in terms of this intersection of the physical world and the digital world. And so that is quite exciting in of itself. Foundationally to all of that is blockchain. And so again, that's another of those visceral worlds where people default to crypto investing underneath, and there's debate on what came first, right? Crypto or blockchain, but essentially blockchain is the technology that drives crypto. So one of the core principles that we talk about in the book of Web3 is this notion of interoperability, this ability to have assets that can be transported across different domains or different environments or different worlds through bridge technology, and in many ways that's blockchain. So once you have Web3 established, you can then start to talk about what is the delineation and shared border of the metaverse. And the metaverse essentially are, quite often people think of AR or VR scenarios, but it's much broader than that. Essentially, it's these very immersive 3D persistent experiences in and out of the virtual world. So that's, I think we're seeing some early indications of that with NFTs, a lot of excitement over the last 24 months. I think when people, somewhat criticize NFTs, they're looking at it from a very narrow aperture of NFTs as an investment tool. But when you zoom out, it's actually an indication of, again, this ability to own assets, this decentralized nature of Web3 and the metaverse, where you can own personal assets and share them across different aspects. So I think it's really, I would encourage people to look at NFTs as what do they represent, rather than from an investment standpoint. Does creativity look like now that we're in this hybrid world? Some might call it the metaverse, right? What does creative reviews look like? I think is something we've been thinking a lot about in terms of back in the day. There was a lot of value of all being in the same room. You could print everything out, which was probably not too environmentally friendly. You would tape it up all, in the war room, on the wall. I don't like the phrase war room anymore, but on a wall, and you would just kind of have dialogue about it and point, mark it up, rip things, throw it around. What is the comparable of that in this era of online meeting spaces? And so from a software standpoint, that's where we're really thinking hard, and we're excited to be coming out with some new technologies, some new software that's going to facilitate greater collaboration from all stakeholders. And we're kind of pulling a term from gaming. It's creativity is truly a multiplayer game at this point. So I think techniques and technologies that allow greater collaboration is something that we're heavily focused on, and something I think we're going to start to see in the work soon, even more so going forward. Thank you for having me. I'm quite excited to be a part of it, and also see South Korea and feel the creative energy in person. So really thrilled to be there. I think since I started out, award shows have always been not the end goal, but a byproduct of what great work is. And I think to have juries come together and discuss is invaluable for an industry, but also for the award winners. I think the definition of creativity is continuously expanding. I remember a few years ago where it was a sharp debate on, are we judging marketing creativity or product creativity, design? And now a year or two now, experience design is in the mix as well. So I think it's kind of collective agreement. It's marketing design, it's creative design, it's experience design and product design. It's all of those things. Creativity can take many different forms. So I think that's the power of having juries come together. And thank you for being the platform to allow that, because I think that helps advance, having creativity continuously be a seat at the board table. Award shows have been and will continue to always be a benchmark of success and a byproduct of success. It's not the only way to measure success, but it's a time-tested one of the best ways to showcase, guiding stars for the industry. Yeah, I'm quite excited with this category, specifically e-commerce, which I think is, a fascinating sector in terms of, it's traditionally been a very transactional environment. And so I think the challenge there is how do you weave in creativity, storytelling, emotion into a traditionally transactional environment. And so that's, infinitely difficult. So I think that's something will be interesting to see. And then it will also be, I think, one hypothesis is e-com might be the central hub for a number of those other sectors, or at least a destination point for a number of those different aspects. So I'm going to be curious to see the work and if that hypothesis is validated or not. I just offer up to the creative community everything and talk about yourself is just keeping the idea simple and to the point, and how to best represent it in an emotional, captivating way is an equal magical part of great work as well.